all across space, all across time. Mysteries that we can't understand.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
Looking into the stories and those behind them. Welcome to UAP Insight Podcast. Hey everybody, we have another great episode for you today. I am speaking with Dale Robinson, aka Observer of Anomalous Objects over on YouTube. If you haven't had a chance yet, check him out. But he is a Navy veteran, pastor of all things, which in the UFO topic, I've never heard of anyone else who is a pastor as well as an experiencer. So he's based out of Oregon, but he's kind of been all around. Son of migrant parents, married, couple of kids, awesome guy. So without any further ado, let's bring him in.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. How you doing today, Dale?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Doing good. Being busy all the time, but yeah, it's raining here in Oregon, so it's a little darker. You would have. We'd done this a week ago, it was like it felt like spring out here. Now it feels like winter's almost come back.
Well, hopefully not. I mean, we're getting a little bit of rain up here in Northeast Washington as well, but get a few sun breaks within. So
Yeah, you said
yeah,
you're up
so
in Northeast Washington, basically.
yeah, so I actually am about probably about a 3-minute drive from the Columbia River and about 20-minute drive from the Canadian border. So
My good friend Shane Frakes, Old Vet Symposium, for all those on X, you'll recognize him. He used to live in up in Yakima, and a little bit over a year ago, I went up to see him, and we had a great time at the Legends Casino. We ate like kings, had prime rib and New York steak. It was amazing. And then we went out orb hunting afterwards and saw some things. So that was pretty cool.
yeah, I actually had Shane on when we're recording this. The episode would have just dropped this morning, but he actually mentioned you kind of a little bit about how he had just started experiencing stuff like just rapid scale. So he went out with his buddy Dale orb hunting. So it's nice to kind of make the connection there.
Yeah, he's an amazing person. He's a brother to me. Absolute brother. Well, you want me to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just kind of go through your story as you've prepared it, and if I have any questions, I'll just kind of try and pop in and ask them along the way.
Okay, maybe get some clarification if I don't say something clear enough. Well, the first thing I want to talk about, and Ray's already hit on it, and it's the fact that I'm not unique in the sense that I'm an experiencer. There's a lot of experiencers out there, and so it's not unique to be an experiencer. What makes my story maybe a little bit unique is that I'm also a pastor. And as Ray said, there are not very many pastors out there that are experiencers. And I don't know of another one that is a podcaster that covers the topics of UAPs or UFOs, whatever term you want to use for it. And so that kind of makes my story a little bit unique. But I want to make this clear that I'm not in the community to be a pastor. That's my other job. I'm here to be a UAP researcher and so that's what I do. I just happen to also be a pastor, and most people know me. They know I'm not your typical pastor anyway. I'm not judgmental. I'm very open-minded, but that is one of the things that's unique about me. The other thing is just trying to put the story together. The reason I had to write it out and organize it is because there are so many moving parts. I didn't even know how to begin to tell my story. And so I had to decide, do I go back to Coachella, which when I was age 6, I kind of feel like that's ground zero for me. But I realized that Coachella wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't understand how I ended up going back to Coachella without going to the synchronicities. And so that's the first place I want to start. And I'll mention this first. It's not part of the synchronicities, but it was one of the first paranormal events that happened to me. And it actually happened in the church. It was about 8 years ago. A lady's mom had passed away, and so she asked me to do a memorial service for her. And so we were setting up for the service. I had moved the communion table in the center aisle, had put the dead lady's picture on the right, put her urn in the middle and flowers on the left. We had the doors shut, the windows were shut, and I was up by the communion table when out of nowhere, this wind came rushing down the center aisle, and it hit that dead lady's picture and knocked it over. But it didn't affect the urn, didn't affect the flowers on the other side. And what's strange about that is about, I don't know, 4 months ago, I was watching one of the latest episodes of Expedition X with Josh Gates, and he was going to send the young male and woman out to this forest in Transylvania. I think it's in Romania, I think that's where that's located. But it was a haunted forest. And before he sent them out, he sat them down and he showed them footage from like 15 years earlier where Josh had been out there with his team. And they had the cameraman out there recording in case anything happened. And remember, this was a haunted forest. And so the cameraman's out there and they've got another camera on him when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this wind comes and hits him and it drags him and it knocks him over, even scratches his arms. It hit him so hard. And so I thought, man, that really reminded me of what happened at the church. And it's like, wow. The interesting thing, the reason that wind is so important, and especially as you try to tie it to spirits or ghosts, is that in the Greek, the same word for spirit is the same word for wind. It is pneuma, and it means spirit, it means wind. And so my opinion, especially after thinking about it, is that lady, that wind was the lady's spirit. And I really believe that she was sending me some kind of message. It felt angry. Now that I could be wrong on that because, it's what I sensed and I could have gotten that wrong. But I felt like she was angry and she was trying to tell me that I had something wrong. And I think I know what it is now because I didn't believe in past lives prior to that. I absolutely did not believe in past lives. Now I've had some things happen since then that have absolutely convinced me that past lives are real and stuff. So that's not part of what I would call this grouping of synchronicities. Most of these synchronicities, most of them would occur within a year's time. And so the first synchronicity happened back on July 7th of 2023. I'd bought a brand new pair of night vision binoculars. And I haven't said this in any of the other accounts, but it turned out that the video function was corrupted. And so I'm out there with it, not knowing that the video is not going to work. And my wife had brought out her telescopic binoculars as well. And so we go to the Mallard Creek Golf Course. It's at night, so nobody's there. There's not a lot of lights. It feels like a safe place to set up. And so we set up, and I'm looking over into the west skies, and I noticed this yellow object that was going from west to east. And I got my night vision on it, and I started recording it. I told my wife about it. And so she saw it with her telescopic binoculars as well. Plus, we saw it with the naked eye. So it wasn't like a camera trick or a flare or something like that. It was real, whatever it was. And so it was going across the sky. It was yellow. And then it went behind this big tree. And when it came out the other side of the tree, it was red, blue, and yellow. And just absolutely blew me away. Now, the problem was that the video was corrupted. My wife was able to save 3 stills of it. And so I do have some pictures of it. But the problem was I was brand new at trying to use these night visions. I was new at it. And I thought if it's far away, like in space, you would magnify it out to the highest level. And I think these had like, times 32. Now I've since learned, I think about 12 or 6 is the ideal setting to be able to focus on things out there in space. And so even the stills are not very good because of the focus was off, but at least I have some evidence of it. The second thing that happened is a little different. It's not really UAP related, but I think all of this is related in some way. And so this had more to do with what I consider a psychic event. And that is, I was out at the golf course. I'm guessing it was a couple of months after, August, September, somewhere in there, after seeing the orb at Mallard Creek. And I'm out there with my friend, and he had hit his ball on T11. There's only 9 holes, so that's the blue tees going around the second time. And so it would be hole 2 if you were going on the whites the first time around. But anyway, he hit his ball out into the hazard. And as I'm going out there, something like an impression, that's the best way I can explain it, told me I was going to find a Titleist Pro V1 golf ball. And I need to explain this for a second. It doesn't sound strange to find a golf ball on a golf course, right?
Yeah,
you're always
but
going to
a
find golf balls.
specific type of golf ball, that is kind of extremely weird, because I mean you have dozens of different types and models and brands, so just that specificity is just kind of a weird impression to get.
Yeah, there's probably 150, 200 different kinds of golf balls. The manufacturers like Titleist, TaylorMade, there's a whole bunch of different ones that are out there. And I think if you took them all together and you took of all the different brands and the models, you'd probably come up with about 150 to 200 different golf balls. And so the deal was, this wasn't just, I'm going to find a Titleist. This was a Titleist Pro V1. It was a specific golf ball. And during my life, I've had things happen where I knew the answer to things that I shouldn't know the answer to. I've known things that I shouldn't know, but I've never had anything this specific, and so I'm going out there. I almost tell my buddy Kurt about it, but I said, well, if I'm wrong, he's going to think I'm crazy. And so I decided not to. And so we go out looking for his golf ball. And after about a minute, he finds his, and I haven't found any golf balls at all. And I'm just about ready to give up. And I look down and I see something white under a leaf. And so I move the leaf aside, and it's a golf ball. And I pick it up, and it says Titleist on it. And as God is my witness, I said, what are the odds that this is a Pro V1? And I rotated it, and it said Pro V1 on it. And I was just absolutely blown away. I did tell Kurt about it afterwards, which isn't very impressive, but it's a true story, and it really did happen. The next one that happened was on April 18th at 10 o'clock at night. I was sitting in my house, in my man cave, listening to TV, and all of a sudden I heard this, what sounded like a helicopter outside. And it was a little ways away, but I was trying to figure out, about the only helicopter that I would think would be there would be Life Flight, because we don't have any military bases by. We don't have military exercises taking place. And so I was curious, well, why is Life Flight over here? Why is it over on my end of town in Sweet Home, which is only about 9,000 people? And so I get up to go out and check it out. And I've got 2 German Shepherds that are guard dogs, and they bark at everything. And so as I'm going out the door, I'm a little surprised because they're alerted, their ears are up, but they're not barking. And so that was a little strange, but it wasn't that strange in itself. So I went outside, and I could see the lights in a distance to the north. And I noticed it was coming towards me. And so I'm watching it, and it keeps coming closer and closer and closer. And it ends up like right over the top of my house. I'm sitting there staring up at it in awe. I'm looking at the lights, the distance between the lights I can see. And I'm going, this is a big helicopter. And I'm trying to figure out why it's so quiet. This thing should be, it's right above the tree line. I don't know how they're missing in the trees. And then on top of that, I'm going, how come branches aren't coming down? How come there isn't this rotor wash that all helicopters have? I was a chain and chalk man in the Navy. And so that meant I had to go and when the helicopter landed on deck, I had to go put the chocks under the wheels and then chain them down so that they would be secured to the deck, because, ships kind of roll back and forth. And so I'm not ignorant when it comes to helicopters. And so, I've never heard of a helicopter that doesn't have rotor wash. And then later on, something came to me that I didn't catch right away. And that is that there were no strobe lights. The anti-collision lights, those are supposed to strobe like 40 to 100 times a minute. And so that wasn't going on. And if that wasn't strange enough, it left and then it came back over my house again. And this is where it really gets weird. I'm staring up at it, and these emotions start hitting me. The word I used originally was surreal, but I also used the term that it was like a religious experience. And that was pretty phenomenal, but it was kind of an isolated incident until I heard Jake Barber talk about his experience when he was hauling the 8-gon UFO disc, about the emotions that just overwhelmed him. Now, he used a term that I probably wouldn't use. He talked about, it possessing him. And if he had talked to me, not that he needed to, I would have recommended like it communed with him. Because a lot of times when people think about possession, they think of like demon possession. And for all those out there that are ready, the Christians out there that want to say this is all demons, it just kind of feeds that narrative. And so I don't think that's a very good idea to do that. I wouldn't have advised it anyway. But anyway, I'd say like commune, like something made contact with me. And it wasn't anything like his was, because of the fact that it hit me and then it was gone. But it was like one of the magical is the word I use for it, kind of like a religious experience. It was just an unreal thing. And the funny thing was, the other UAPs I saw, maybe it's because of distance, I didn't have that same emotion. There was something special about this. And so that was on April 18th. About a month later, I'm in my office at work, and I've got this ant problem. But I deal with these ants this way. If you leave me alone, I leave you alone. If you stay off my desk, I won't bother you. I don't like killing things. And so we kind of had a neutrality thing going on there where they leave my desk alone so I could eat my food and they wouldn't be trying to crawl on my food or on my arms or whatever. And so one day I was looking and I noticed that they were on the same spot on the wall. And I was like, I just saw you there yesterday and the day before, and I'm noticing that you're not moving. And those were the 5 that were in a row together. And so I went over there and looked, and I noticed that there were probably about 12 ants, and they were all on the wall. They were all dead. And then there was this one, it was one of the 12 or 13, however you want to count it, that was on the cord of the blinds. And it basically was peeking around the corner, looking what it looked like anyway to me, like it was looking at something. And the thing that's crazy about this story is that they were all dead. They all died in place. They all died instantly. And there was absolutely no sign of trauma. Now, about 5 months later, I was doing something over on the south wall, and I saw a dead ant. And so I took some pictures of it, and I thought, well, I'm going to go look and see if there are any other dead ants from that time. And I found another one on the west wall. And Steve has that picture of it in his video. And it's just like, you zoom in on it, it looks absolutely alive. In fact, they all do. But it's dead. And this one, those 2, in fact, have been dead for 5 months. And the crazy thing about it is when it first happened, the first thing I did was call a guy who goes to my church, who's a professional exterminator. And so I asked him, if he ever seen anything like this. I couldn't understand how these ants had died, how they died in place, how they died instantly. And I've asked him more than once, and he has no clue. This is a guy that's, that has his own business for around 30 years, and he'd never seen anything like it. Now, one thing that my wife helped me to understand is that when ants die, normally they will let off a scent, an oleac scent, and the living ants in the colony will come and recover those bodies and take them back, by the colony itself in some area that they have where they dispose of that. But they normally come and get it. And so I noticed that these ants had been there for about a week and there were no ants. Nobody ever came to get them. In fact, I didn't see ants for like 9 months. They just finally came back, and I suspect it's probably a new colony that is established, and maybe where their colony was. But it was just bizarre because I have no explanation for it. It's like,
So at the time, did you notice any signs of ants elsewhere in the building, or was it only in your office?
no, there were ants in the bathroom, and those ants were not affected.
Okay, so
they came
just
back.
kind of a localized, almost as though. Okay.
It was to my office specific. That's what I finally came to the conclusion, because of the olac resin and the other ones didn't get it, that the whole colony was probably wiped out. And so there was nobody to come. So whatever it was, it killed them so fast that they didn't even have time to react. And I've tried to come up with scenarios. I've had people talk about, maybe it was an electrical surge. Well, if it's an electrical surge, you would have had some kind of trauma on the bodies. The ants would have reacted. Normally when you kill ants with like spray, they curl up. These ants were perfectly intact and stuff. So and this, like I said, this is nothing to deal with fact. This is just me theorizing, trying to figure out what could have done this. But the only thing I can come up with that might explain it, and even that's like, it's that like time stopped for them and they just died instantly. I'm not saying that's what it was, but that's the closest thing I can come up with. But because it was just crazy. I mean, there was no trauma. They all died instantly in place, and it killed all of them without any sign of trauma. And like I said, I found those other two 5 months later, and the one on the windowsill that Steve had the picture of, it is in perfect condition. And I don't know how long it takes their skeletons to break down. According to Google, it doesn't take very long at all for the deterioration process to begin. But this one was in perfect condition. You would not have known it was dead just by looking at it. It's just that it was dead. It wasn't moving. It wasn't going anywhere. There was no life in it, but you would never know it just by looking at it because it looked alive. That's how all of them looked. They looked alive. And so that was my fourth synchronicity. The fifth one happened when I got back from Roswell. I had made that 12-hour road trip days. It took me 12 hours a day to get over there, 2 days. It took me 2 days at 12 hours to get back. And so it was July 10th, I think it was. I went outside in my backyard, and by then I'd gotten better with my night vision and stuff like that. I didn't have them with me because I wasn't expecting to see anything, but so I got pretty good at recognizing satellites. In fact, I think it was Ben Hansen. We went on a Skywatch, and he explained a lot about, what satellites look like and how they act and all that. So, I had a pretty good idea. And so when I first saw this object, I thought it was just a satellite until I looked closer and I noticed it was oscillating. And it reminded me of Mark D'Antonio talking about particle accelerators and what it might produce. He talked about an oscillating effect. And so I'm looking at it and it's oscillating. I'm still not 100% sure it's not a satellite, even though I've never seen a satellite oscillate like that. Literally like this, just bouncing through the sky. And then all of a sudden it started making a right turn. And by the time it did that, it was already almost going out of the picture. So I didn't have time to go get a camera or night vision. Night vision would have been the only thing to probably have picked it up. But that was it. Now, here's the reason why I brought the synchronicities up first. The reason I brought them up first is because I really felt like they were signs pointing back to Coachella. They got me thinking about, hey, these strange things are going on in my life. Maybe I should reevaluate some of the other things in my life that were strange. And I had some things happen when I was in Coachella. The one that really stuck with me was the fact I have this reoccurring dream. And I've had it at least 8 or 9 years. I may have had it longer than that, but that's as far back as I can remember. 8 or 9 years. I'm thinking 15, 20 times, somewhere in that ballpark. But it's a reoccurring dream where I have pain. And I researched, I guess it's kind of uncommon to have pain, actual physical pain in your dreams, but to have the same dream over and over again with the same pain over and over again, that's kind of rare. And I always felt like that there was some kind of trauma associated with that. And so I thought about, maybe getting hypnotized, getting regressed to try to figure out what that was. And so all this is taking me back to Coachella. I believe that's where the reoccurring dream is from. I've always felt like something happened in Coachella, but I couldn't remember it. But this, like I said, this dream is just reoccurring, and it's the same dream. But the other thing that happened, and by itself, it's not a big deal. You would never jump to conclusions because of having severe bloody noses. In fact, I can still remember the image of the white rag my mom put up to my nose. It was the right side. I can still remember that. And it was blood red. I mean, I had heavy nosebleeds, and by themselves, that's nothing. But if you have other things, that can be one more piece of the puzzle about whether you've been abducted or taken. Another one that came out was I'd started talking to my sister about the synchronicities and talking to her about the bloody nose and the reoccurring dream in Coachella. And she told me something she had never told me before. And that is that one night in particular, this happened more than once, but she was telling me about this one night in particular that she opened the front door. And when she did, she heard this low humming sound. And so she looked up, and there was an object that was so big, it was literally blotting out the stars. Because I asked her, I said, well, what kind of shape was it? I wanted to know if it was a disc, if it was a triangle, or what it was. And she said she couldn't tell because of the fact that, it covered the whole area. The opening she had was about the size of the duplex that we lived in. That's the vantage point she had looking up into the sky. And so she couldn't tell what it was. And so that one really started getting me thinking, but because of the reoccurring dreams, I decided that I wanted to get regressed. And I was talking to my friend Mario Woods about it. And Mario and I are good friends. And I told him the things that happened. And he's like, you need to talk to Yvonne Smith and talk about getting regressed. And I can't explain it. Maybe I heard her name before. But the second he said Yvonne Smith, I'm like, she's the one. She's going to be the one to regress me because I have serious trust issues. And I knew it would take somebody special to be able for me to trust him enough to put me under hypnosis to be able to do this. But the second he said her name, I just knew that she was the right person to do it. Now, Mario is such a good friend that he actually reached out to Yvonne for me, gave her my contact information, and then she emailed me. And so we got that set up. And so one of the other things I need to make sure that I mention is that when I did the paperwork on this for Yvonne, you write down all the stuff, and then she evaluates you and decides if you if you qualify, if you should go forward or not. And there was one thing I did not put in there that I didn't think it really related. And it was this this memory. And I want to stress that it was a memory. It's as real as any other memory I have. And it was of this teenage girl. She was a friend of my sister's. And it was in our duplex in Coachella. and she wanted me to sneak out at midnight and meet her. And so, I mean, I was a 6-year-old boy. I get pretty excited. A teenage girl wants me to sneak out and meet her at midnight. And so I go into my room, and I'm up in my top bunk. I'm trying not to go to sleep because I want to sneak out and meet this girl. Now, I've always believed that I fell asleep, and so I missed out. But the one thing that was strange is the next day when I got up, she wasn't there. She wasn't there. And so that was a strange thing, because it came to me, this memory came back to me on my way to Roswell. And for my whole life, it was a normal memory, right? This is just normal. Teenage girl wanting a 6-year-old boy to go out and meet her at midnight. But for the first time ever, as I was driving to Roswell, it didn't make sense. I thought, what teenage girl's going to want a 6-year-old boy to sneak out and meet her, and I never thought about it. It's like a tiger by the tail. What are you going to do when you catch it? And so it never made sense. And so I'm thinking about that. I get to Roswell. Let me get a drink real quick. My throat is definitely giving me trouble.
Yeah, no, you're good.
But anyway, I get to Roswell, and Ben Hansen is doing one of his sessions, and he tells the story of a lady. Her mother's died, and all of a sudden the daughter sees her dead mother, and she's pretty excited. You can imagine, you lost your mom, you'd be excited to get to see her again, get to talk to her again. And so the mom convinces the daughter to go with her, and they end up on an alien spacecraft. And as she's in this craft looking at her mother turns in to an alien. She was an alien all along. It was an alien all along, pretending to be her mother, deceiving her. And the way Ben described it, the daughter was ticked. She started cussing at that alien and stuff, but it was all to get her to go on the ship. And so it started getting me thinking about that teenage girl again. And I'm going, wow, what if this teenage girl wasn't really a teenage girl? What if she was an alien who had tricked me to try to go outside with her, because there's this craft that has been hovering, above our house more than once to try to get me outside, to be able to make it as easy as possible and not disruptive, at all, if they could just get me to voluntarily go out. Now, I've changed my mind on that, got more information. And so I've decided it's probably more likely a screen memory than anything else. But let me continue the story. So I call my sister up. I get back to my hotel room after Ben gets done telling that story and his session's over. And so I'm excited to ask my sister about her friend. And that's when I got my mind absolutely blown. That's when my sister told me that she didn't have any teenage friends because she was only 9 years old. And on top of that, none of her friends ever spent the night. And so I'm a pretty rational person. I'm looking for another possible answer. And so I said, well, did we ever have any teenage babysitters? And she said, no, the only person who ever babysitted us was this African-American lady, and she was older. And I can tell you that that girl I saw had blonde hair. She had like a shirt with 3 different colors on it. I think it was white, red, and blue. I'm not saying in that order, but those were the colors. And so it did not match. And let me tell you, my world got rocked that day. Because as I told you before, that memory was as real as any other memory. And so if I couldn't trust that memory, how would I be able to ever trust any of my other memories? And so it really got to me for a few days there. It really did. It's like, what is reality? I mean, what can I trust? I mean, if I can't trust my own memory, what can I trust? And so that was pretty overwhelming. Now, I had already set up some hypnosis sessions with Yvonne Smith, and I set down a list of things I wanted to explore, and that teenage girl was definitely at the top of the list. I wanted to explore the reoccurring dreams. I wanted to explore whatever that was. I'm convinced now it was not a helicopter, because every helicopter has rotor wash. They have anti-collision lights. And the fact that my dogs didn't bark when they bark at everything, that there was something different about this. In fact, I didn't mention this, but when it happened, for a split second, I thought if it did not sound sort of like a helicopter, because it was quieter than it should have been, I would have thought it was NHI. But I pushed it aside because I've got a rational mind. But, you know, those things were all going on. And so I decided to go ahead and do the sessions. And I think it was September 21st, we did the first session. Now, I need to preface this. Before I left, I was having trouble visualizing things. My theory on it is I went through so much trauma in about a 3 or 4 year period. Most of it was within a 2-week period, but it was in the last 4 years. But my sister died, my half brother died, and 2 of my childhood friends all died within 2 weeks of each other. And it was just crazy. I couldn't even begin to deal with my sister's loss. And then my half brother, step brother, whatever you want to call him. Then he died. And then within the next week or so, then 2 more of my childhood friends died. It just felt like my whole past was being erased, one person at a time. And then on top of that, I had a family member, a very close family member, who was suicidal. And I went through pure hell trying to keep that family member alive. And I don't know how many other people this happens to, but it happens to me. When people die, when there's major trauma like that, it overwhelms me to the point that my emotions shut down. I get numb. And so, especially with that much stuff. And so my theory on it is, I wasn't able to visualize, because even a friend of mine wanted me to visualize an 8-track player or VHS player. And he was trying to help me because he knew I was under a lot of stress and stuff. And he thought, well, when you go to sleep tonight, just envision a VHS player. The tape in it has all the stress on it. So you pull that one out. You put another tape on it, has all your favorite places and all the things that you like. And you put that in. And then he says, I've used it with other people. It's helped them. So I go to bed. I close my eyes. And I cannot envision anything. I tried later on trying to envision a banana or an orange, and I couldn't. I could not in my mind. And I think that's because when you go numb like that, it shuts down part of your brain. And I'm guessing the creative part, that allows you to do it. That's my theory anyway. It's not fact, but it's my theory. And so we go into the first session, and Yvonne's able to get me hypnotized. But the only way I can explain it is it's like trying to watch a movie with your eyes shut. You know, I got glimpses of things, but that was it. The only thing that really got a reaction was when we went to the reoccurring dream. And I'll be honest, that scared me. Because when we tried to go back to that, my body started twitching. It started jerking. And I couldn't see anything. It looked like it was like a dark pit. But I didn't want to go any further, because I knew whatever was behind that was going to be pretty traumatic, and I didn't want that to take away from discovering the other stuff. And so I asked not to do that. And so we went out of that. But like I said, I was really, really disappointed because of the fact that I drove all the way to California to do this. And even though she was able to hypnotize me, I wasn't able to really make any real progress. And it wasn't her fault. It was my fault, because I couldn't envision. And so that Saturday night, I decided I was going to work on trying to envision things, because I knew if I was going to have success in hypnosis, I had to be able to see those memories when they came back. And I couldn't do that. So I started doing that, and I started trying to envision things. And all of a sudden I was able to envision a stream in the woods. I could see a little water going down it. I could see the stones. And it was really it really made me feel good because I knew if I could do that, then I'd be able to see other stuff. And so I immediately called my wife, asked her to send this picture of there were the 4 kids of us and my dad, my other 3 siblings and my dad, and it was in front of the duplex. And so I wanted to stare at that. I wanted to memorize that. I wanted to have that in my mind. And so after I did that, I closed my eyes and I started trying to visualize that duplex. And my suspicion is that I went back under hypnosis, that I'd been hypnotized earlier that day and I just went back under hypnosis. Just so everybody knows, hypnosis is kind of like being in a trance state. Isn't like the Manchurian Candidate or anything like that. It's like you still have control, but people can't make you do things that you don't want to do. But so I'm I guess the best way I can explain it so it makes sense to you guys, it's like you're driving down the road and you get in a trance-like state, and all of a sudden you've gone 10 miles and you can't remember driving those 10 miles. It's like, wow, my exit's here already. I mean, I was just 10 miles, a second ago, I was only 10 miles away. I was 10 miles away. And now all of a sudden I'm here. I think everybody's experienced that at some time. So that's the trance-like state. So anyway, I'm going in, I go back under hypnosis. I'm sure that's what happened. I'm walking in front of the duplex. I can see the sidewalk. I can see the windows. This is all me. I'm going. Now I know there is a field on the other side of the duplex. I remember there used to be a store on the other side. So even without the picture, I had the conscious memory of that. My best friend, Andy Alaska, and I used to, play out in that field, and his house was on the other side over here. And so I knew that field, but this is what's really, really strange. As soon as I got to that field, without any forethought, without me thinking anything, I just started rising up into the air. And I'm just, I'm in awe. Now I want to stress this because every time I tell people this story, they go, oh, that must have been scary. That must have been terrifying. It wasn't. I'm not saying there isn't stuff that's terrifying. There is. That reoccurring dream is something that's terrifying. But this wasn't, and so I'm going up into the sky and I'm just amazed. And I start looking down and I can see the rooftops. I can see the countryside. And I keep going up and up and up. And next thing I know, I'm on this craft. And it's transparent, pretty much transparent. But there is this tubing that goes through the middle. And in the middle, there is this purple or dark blue ball like this. And the tubing's smaller. And then it feeds out kind of like a spider web. But not as pronounced. And so about that time is when I ended up coming out of the trance. Now, here's what's strange is about 2 months later, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about going, that experience itself of going up into the air. And all of a sudden, this image just rushes at me. And it is an image of a tall gray, absolute focus. There are 2 smaller aliens with him, and they're kind of blurred out, but I'm convinced that they're most likely small grays, and I'll tell you why in a second. But Yvonne told me to draw some of the stuff I saw, and so I drew that, and for whatever reason, I drew a line right through the midsection of them, and I started wondering, could that have been an examination table? And so then I was watching one of Steve Neal's videos, and he's got the Breaking the Silence channel, and he's got this one film called A Child's Encounter. And I'm watching it, and all of a sudden, there's this image of a tall gray, 2 small grays, him on an examination table, and all of the grays cut off at the waist. And so those things really get to me because it's like confirmation. It's like, I'm not the only one who had this experience. Somebody else did. And then I was watching Richard Dolan. he had Peter Robbins on, and Peter Robbins was talking about an experience that his sister had. Now, he was there, but he didn't have the same experience. But he talked about how she started floating up into the air and how she was able to see the roof of their house and the roof, I guess, of other houses. And she's going up. And the one commonality between my story, Steve's story, and her story, at least one of them, is none of us were afraid. We had no anxiety. Steve called it his Peter Pan moment. I mean, who doesn't want to be Peter Pan and float through the air? And so that's how he felt about it. And so she's going up and up. Now, she did something that I did not do. She looked up. And when she looked up, she saw a craft above her. And then, exactly like me, the next thing she knows, she's on a craft. And she sees a tall gray and a small gray. And then she would later go on and see more smaller grays. But I really believe that if I had stayed in that trance state, that image that came to me was what would have happened next. That the tall gray and the small grays would have come and got me and taken me. At least that's my best explanation for it. But it was so reassuring to hear other people. And the thing about it is all three of these experiences happened in the 1960s. And so we all had the same experience in the same decade. But that really, gave me a lot of confidence in the fact that what I was seeing was real. And so after that was done, you can imagine Saturday was a real battle, Ray, because of the fact that I couldn't envision things. Sunday was a whole nother story. I went into Sunday feeling very optimistic. Especially after having that experience of going up into the air, that was so amazing. And so Yvonne put me under. It was at 12:30. I think I met with her on that Sunday, the 22nd of September. And I went deeper. I went a lot deeper. And so this time when she took me to the house, the first place that we were going to go was to try to figure out who this teenage girl was. And so right before that happened, she had me walking around the house, seeing things. And then all of a sudden she brought up the teenage girl. And I saw her. It was just like in my conscious memory. And I saw her leave and go into the bedroom with my sisters, which I swear is also in my conscious memory. And then I go into my room. And I'm sitting on my bed saying, don't go to sleep, don't go to sleep, don't go to sleep. And that is the end of anything to do with the teenage girl. There's nothing under hypnosis. And so I'm convinced that was an implanted memory, as Freud says, to block something that was probably traumatic. Just imagine being 6 years old and being taken. It's not like when I floated up in the air. I don't really remember being super afraid, but I think I'm looking back at it as a, 62-year-old man. But at 6 years old, that would have to be traumatic, to be taken from your home. And so I think that they created that so that I wouldn't remember what happened next. And so as I'm sitting on my bed, one of the things that happens is this image of an owl shows up. And then it disappears. And then behind me, there is this light. And I can't figure it out because there's no windows in my room. This is a middle room, but it's behind me. And then the next thing that happens is all of a sudden these rows of what looks like bricks are going horizontally, just like this. And then all of a sudden they go vertically, and there's like this silo. And the next thing I know, I'm in this cavern. And it almost feels like I'm in a craft, or maybe I would describe it now as maybe floating. But at the time, I said, I think I might be in a craft. And the strange thing about it was when I was going up into the sky, it's like I had just an open view. And that's the exact same view I had when I was in that cavern. And so I would go forward, I'd come backwards. The cavern was smooth. Steve called it underground base. And I guess after I analyzed it, I think that's a good analysis because there were chambers that opened and shut. And some of those chambers that I saw beings in them, but they were far enough away I couldn't determine if they were human or aliens. But I could definitely see the shape, a humanoid shape, in the sense which would fit Greys or Nordics or humans. So I don't know for sure, what I was seeing as far as what species. But then I come outside of it and I'm looking at it, and it's like a rock planet. And they have these peaks like this, and they're all over the place. And I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I see crafts, and I see one that's looks the exact same color as the planet itself. And then I see other craft that are not the same color, but they look more like tubing and stuff like that. They were made of just different, not what I expected. And then all of a sudden I see this white light, and it's so bright I can't hardly see it. And when it finally dims down, it's a crystal city. And it's just beautiful. One of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And almost as quickly as I finally can see it, it's like all the lights go out. And I don't know why I said this, but about 5 different times when I was there, I was like, these things look camouflaged. I mean, the chambers would open and shut, and you couldn't hardly tell where they were at. And the other thing that happened was there was this, what I described as like a meteor belt, a small meteor belt. And there was some kind of an object that was in the middle of it. And, and it looked like the meteors were going around, like it had some kind of gravity. And for whatever reason, I think I used the word outpost. I said, I think that's an outpost. And I don't know why I thought that, but, and then one of the other things that happened right towards the end of the session was I saw something being shot out at something. And I remember earlier asking the question, I said, I don't think they're afraid of me. And so what are they afraid of? Why all this camouflage? Why are they hiding? Because if you looked at this planet, if you and I were on a craft and we would go to look at this planet, we would think that it's a dead planet. We would think there's absolutely no life on this planet. And yet, if you looked under the surface, there was all kinds of life, but it just felt like they were hiding from something. And I don't know if they took me to a planet to show me their history, or if they took me there to show me that this is where we used to live, because it was about that time that Yvonne was wanting to bring me out of hypnosis because we were running out of time. We had to go to a Zero meeting afterwards, a group that she hosts once a month. And so we had to go to that. So she was bringing me out. But one thing that Yvonne always does is she gives you a safe place. And so my safe place was that stream. And so she's bringing me back, trying to get me to that stream. But instead of going to that stream, I go to this other planet. And it is absolute contrast to the rock planet. I mean, it is green. There's these ponds. They've got this foliage around it, these different plants. I don't even know if you call it grass, but it was perfectly manicured. And so this setup, you saw several of these ponds. And then in the background, there was this beautiful, beautiful bridge. And I was so upset because I wanted to explore that planet. But it was time to go. And so I finally got back and got out of it. And boy, Yvonne and I had a great conversation of kind of debriefing after that was all over. Things continue to happen. One of the things that, once you start experiencing stuff like this, especially when you didn't realize it to begin with, but most of the time this stuff is generational, like I said before. And this stuff's been going on. But I think once you recognize it, once you start paying attention to it, you can just expect that you're going to see more things. You're going to experiencing more things. At least that's what it's worked. That's how it's worked out for me. I have another friend who is an experiencer, and I'll conclude with this story. But we were talking on the phone, and she's worked with experiencers for a long, long time, and so I was sharing my experience with her, and I just barely got started. 5-10 minutes. I don't even think 15 minutes was possible. I think 10 minutes was probably the longest I could have been talking, but it felt more like 5 minutes. And all of a sudden, she stopped me. In fact, she said, "Dale, stop." And the second she said stop, I looked at the timer because we were on Signal, and it showed how long we've been talking. And it said 43 minutes. And I'm like, oh my goodness, where did that time go to? Now, if it was me by myself, I thought, well, maybe just, you spaced it or something. But then she said, "Did you notice that?" Without me saying a word to her. She said, "Did you notice that?" And I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, I felt like I was in a tunnel." And she said, "Your voice kept getting more and more intense." And then she said this. She said, "Did you notice the missing time?" And so we both came to the same conclusion that I'd only been talking a few minutes, and yet like 43, 45 minutes had gone by. And it's like, wow. Now I've had other things. I've had something bump my bed, and I wake up, it's on my end of the bed. I've got a wrought iron bed frame, and I expect it's my wife or one of my dogs, and there's nobody there. I had something just the other day, and I've had other things too, but I'll just say this and leave it at this. I was laying in bed, and it felt like something touched my back, and it was like a tsunami, like a wave rolling down my back. I don't know what could cause that. It wasn't like a muscle spasm or anything like that, but it's like somebody touched my back, and just one of the many, many different things that have happened. And I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. You're just going to have to get used to it. But anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to share today.
Well, Dale, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I mean, that's what advice would you give to someone that's an experiencer that hasn't felt courageous enough to share their story?
Well, the first thing I would say is find a support group. I have a chart I've used on one of the other things. Normally what experiencers do is, this stuff is extraordinary. It's a whole new reality. And when you first figure it out, it's really troubling because your whole worldview has changed forever. And so what normally happens is that people will go to the traditional means. They'll go to their family members. They'll go to their friends. They'll go to their pastor. They may go to a psychiatrist or a therapist, but none of those people are able to help them. They're not equipped to help them. And so they don't get any help there. And then they go sometimes into the UAP community, and there are people that want your story, but they're not really interested in you as a person or what your trauma is. And so, you can have skeptics that will use your story to try to debunk you, but it's all about your story. Whether you're on a podcast, whether you're on a, somebody researching wants to hear your story to research it. It's almost always about the story. And very, very seldom is it about what the person actually went through. And so normally, this is the path that a lot of experiencers go. They try here, then they go to the UAP community, and they try here, and sometimes they get exploited in the second group. group B, as my friend calls it. But ultimately, where the help comes is through a group. It can be an in-person group or an online group. In-person group, I think, is probably better. But if you don't have that ability, get with other experiencers. In fact, I have an abductee experiencer group myself, and I created it specifically to help other experiencers out, because you really, really feel isolated, because most people don't understand what you're doing unless they're an experiencer themselves. And then there are people like Yvonne Smith who are equipped to be able to help you through your journey and stuff. And so my advice is to find a group of experiencers to be able to, talk about your experiences instead of keeping them bottled up. Because a lot of times when experiencers share their stories, it's like they get re-victimized again. I see it on X. People make fun of people when they share their stories. And I'm not naive. I know people make stuff up. I know there are people with mental illness out there. But I want to say this. There are a lot of people out there just like me. I'm a rational person. I'm a pastor. I don't make things up. I don't embellish things. And so everything I've told you is the absolute truth as I understand it. And there's a lot of other people like me out there who are having to deal with this in isolation because they're afraid to say anything, because they're afraid they're going to be attacked if they do. And they have good reason to believe that, because that's what happens. And so my advice is, you can always contact me. You can find me on X at DaleRob62. And so if you have experiences, if you want to be a part of a group, I'd be happy to go ahead and talk to you about becoming a part of my group. But if not, find your own group. And I don't know that hypnosis is right for you. I don't think it's right for everyone. Just depends on what's going on in your life and whether you're okay with it or not. Might be, if you're okay with it, it might be better not to, because you might bring up some things you're not ready to deal with. But, that's my advice, Ray.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that advice. I think that experiencers need to support each other and not give in to the stigma that has been built up around experiencers
Well,
for too long. It's
Right.
It's been going on.
Well, I forgot to mention, there's a group called Unhidden, and it is, I think that's the group. There may be another one too, where they're finally coming around to the point where they understand that experiencers, a lot of them have PTSD and they need help. And so now there's finally, we had to get past the nuts and bolts stuff first. We had to be able to get out to Congress and get their interest. And I understand the experiencer stuff may be a bridge too far for some people who don't believe any of this or have never really been involved with any of this. But I think we're at the point now where experiencers and their trauma needs to be addressed. They need to be heard and they need to be helped.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I think that people like yourself that are willing to step out on a limb, say, screw the stigma, you've been through something, and I'm here to help you through it. We need more people like you, more people like that in this community. And I really appreciate you being one of the few who's stepped forward in such a public way to help get the help to those who need it.
Well, and like I said, there is a risk. I've had several of my friends warn me that were worried that I would lose my job over this, because maybe there were people in the church that wouldn't like it. And I can tell you right now, I've got 2 different people in my church who've been taken. I've had another person who has seen 1968. He saw a UFO, and he knows there's no way you can explain what he saw. There was one person that told me they thought they were demons, but in recent time, they've actually started changing their mind and starting to be more open. And there's a few others that know I that I'm into UFOs, but most people don't know that I have a podcast. I don't advertise it. That's not my job on Sunday morning. You know, my job on Sunday morning is to be a pastor and to try to bring hope to people. You know, and I take that over to the community as well. And X is that's what I want to be. I want to be an inspiration. I want to give people hope. I mean, there's so much negativity out in the world that we don't need any more negativity. What we need is hope. And you know what? There's a lot to be hopeful for.
Well, I only have one response to that, and that is amen. So it looks like we're just getting just about out of time here. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I try to ask everybody that I have on. First question, what is your favorite food or meal?
Well, that'd have to be food would be Mexican if you had to go in a general category. I think probably my favorite meal though would be lasagna. So
You can't go wrong with that. Garfield all the way.
Chinese food is not my favorite. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, it definitely does not agree with me either. And the second question is, what is your guilty pleasure dessert?
Oh boy, I've been behaving lately, so you know, I'd say like a shamrock shake, something like that, or a grasshopper shake. Those are pretty good. But I've been behaving myself. I've lost 33 pounds. I'm trying to live to be 103 or something like that. So I had to get my weight down.
Well, that's all right. I've been known to shake a few shamrocks myself. But I really appreciate you coming on to tell your story and be a little more vulnerable than most people are with the things that you've been through. And um, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, just at DaleRob62 on X or Twitter, as well as Observers of Anomalous Objects on YouTube. Check out his podcast. He does an amazing job. And I try to listen to every single episode as soon as it comes out. So, Dale, once again, thank you for coming on. And
I want to promote you for a second. What's the cause you're doing? You're trying to put a documentary together, correct?
Yeah, I'm working on a documentary to try and focus on the phenomenon in Northeast Washington, Central Washington, Oregon, and Idaho.
So how can people help you with that besides subscribing, sharing, and liking?
At this point, I'm just mainly looking for people who have experienced the phenomenon themselves and want to get their story told in an unbiased, exactly how they say it manner. Because too often you get stories that are edited out, and it doesn't capture the full essence of what people are trying to say. So I'm just looking for people that are willing to go on camera. You don't have to use your name or your face. You can be anonymous if that's the way you choose. But just so that your story can be told and kind of get that weight off of your shoulders that likely has been building for a long time.
Okay. So reminder, UAP Insight Pictures. I just want to encourage everyone that's watching this to go ahead and subscribe. Ray's got a good heart, and he supported my channel early on. And this is not something that I normally want to do. I think it has an important purpose, and I'm trying to help other experiencers. But Ray has been one of my big supporters from early on, and that's one of the reasons I agreed to come on to his podcast. So let me just encourage you to go ahead and subscribe, share, and like.
And I appreciate it. Well, it looks like that's about all the time we have for today. But once again, thank you for coming on, Dale. And I hope to have you on to kind of go a little further into your podcast in a future episode, if you're willing.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. I still have more I didn't tell.
Yeah, absolutely. Save it for next time.
Yep.
All right. Thank you again, Dale.
All right. Thank you, Ray, for having me on.